Have you ever wondered why some people always seem to win arguments, even when they're not completely right? What makes them persuasive, confident, and seemingly unstoppable in debates? Winning an argument isn't about proving you're smarter. It's not about raising your voice, getting angry, or crushing someone else's point of view. The secret lies in understanding psychology, strategy, and communication. The real art is knowing how to guide the conversation in your favor. Imagine this scenario. Bo Seo, a debate champion, steps onto a stage. He's facing a strong opponent who seems confident and ready to dominate. But instead of launching into an attack, Bo asks subtle, carefully crafted questions. These aren't aggressive or confrontational. They're designed to make his opponent pause and think. Slowly, the other person begins to notice contradictions in their reasoning. This is called the Socratic method, named after the ancient philosopher Socrates, who taught that the best way to challenge someone isn't to tell them they're wrong, but to guide them to see it for themselves. This approach works in everyday life, to whether you're negotiating a raise, discussing politics with friends, or even debating which movie to watch. Words themselves carry immense power. Consider how small changes in language can shift a conversation. Instead of saying, "You're wrong," you could say, "I feel this might be different." Or, "Have you thought about it this way?" This is known as hypnotic language, and it works because it reduces defensiveness. People naturally resist direct attacks, but when you phrase your ideas carefully, it feels less like confrontation and more like collaboration. Adding rhetorical questions such as, "We all agree this makes sense, right?" subtly encourages agreement without forcing it. These little shifts can completely change the tone of a discussion and make your points feel inevitable. Another key strategy is the power of strategic concession. Let's say someone challenges you with a point you can't easily dispute. Instead of resisting, acknowledge it. "You're right about this. That part makes sense." By admitting where someone is correct, you build trust and lower their guard. Then, once they feel heard, you can focus on the single critical flaw in their argument. This technique is like a judoka in martial arts, using your opponent's energy against them. By conceding the minor points, you make your bigger points stronger, and suddenly, the momentum of the argument shifts in your favor. Then there's the rule of three, a simple yet powerful tool. People naturally recognize patterns in threes. When you present 3 solid reasons or examples to support your point, your argument feels structured and complete. For example, if you're trying to convince a friend to try a new restaurant, instead of listing 10 reasons, give 3 strong, memorable ones. The food is authentic, the service is excellent, and the atmosphere is amazing. That's enough for people to internalize and accept your point without feeling overwhelmed. Another psychological principle to understand is the contrast effect. This works especially well in negotiations or debates about fairness. If you start with an exaggerated statement, the next point you make will seem much more reasonable by comparison. For instance, if you say, "I think we should aim to save 80% of our budget," your next suggestion, "Well, maybe 50% is more realistic," suddenly feels moderate and sensible. By carefully managing expectations, you can make your position appear rational and balanced. Sometimes, winning an argument isn't about subtle persuasion. It's about overwhelming your opponent with information. Presenting facts, statistics, and credible examples can leave someone unsure of how to respond. But the key is to be selective. Don't bombard them with every piece of data you can find. Instead, highlight the most compelling evidence and let it guide the discussion. This way, you maintain control while appearing calm and informed. For example, in a conversation about climate change, you could focus on one undeniable trend: rising global temperatures supported by decades of scientific data. This targeted approach keeps the other person focused on the core issue and less able to deflect or argue every point. The coherence principle is another strategy you can use. Once someone agrees on a small point, it becomes harder for them to deny related conclusions. For example, if your colleague agrees that teamwork is important, you can guide the conversation toward them acknowledging that team decisions should be respected, even if they personally disagree. This technique is subtle but highly effective because it leverages the human desire to appear consistent. Let's not forget timing and humor. Light, well-placed jokes can shift the mood and give you a psychological edge. They shouldn't distract from your argument, but when used strategically, they can disarm tension, making your opponent less defensive and more receptive. A clever one-liner, said at the right moment, can change the dynamic of a debate. So, what does all this mean in practice? Winning an argument isn't about dominating the other person or proving them wrong at every step. It's about guiding perception, using psychology to your advantage, and communicating in a way that makes your points feel clear, reasonable, and persuasive. By asking smart questions, choosing your words carefully, giving concessions strategically, presenting information thoughtfully, and structuring your arguments with principles like the rule of three, you can consistently come out ahead. The truth is, arguments are rarely about facts alone. They're about how people feel, think, and respond. Mastering these strategies allows you to influence thought without forcing it. And when you understand the subtle ways human reasoning works, you realize that the most effective arguments are those that convince quietly, calmly, and strategically. That's how you can win every argument, not by being right all the time, but by being smart about how you engage, communicate, and influence the conversation.